we actually rehearsed it step by step, minute by minute, the day before the Olympics, so that tomorrow this will feel like a little bit more normal than it does today. And the coaches of the US whitewater team are like, you guys know you're not racing today. When we went to execute that whole day, starting at 4:45 in the morning, it was a little bit like Groundhog Day. We had started to plan out that routine 6 months in advance of the Olympic Games. Trust the process, but build a process worth trusting. I made some choices when I was young, and I didn't revisit it for a long, long time.
What was the last thing you told yourself once you realized you won the gold medal? I want you to take me back to 1992. In Barcelona when you won the Olympic gold medal for, I believe it was whitewater canoe slalom. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And I want to know from start to finish that day, the mental and emotional state that allowed you to perform at such a high level.
Oh, it's a great start. And I thank you for saying the entire day, because the really interesting part of it is not the 2 race runs we had down the course, which lasted, each one lasted about 120 seconds, where our day, the Olympic day, is really interesting, is from the moment that we woke up. And so a couple things about that. My canoe partner and I are Scott Straussball, my canoe partner and I, we were big advocates of preparation and routine and practicing routine. And so we knew that the Olympics was going to be a very different kind of whitewater canoe race than other races we had been in before. The canoeing hadn't been in the Olympic Games for 20 years at the time of the 1992 Olympics. So going to a canoe world championships or World Cup race was really different. Like, you knew all the organizers, you knew all the volunteers. And now at the Olympic Games, there's just a lot more people that you don't know, a lot of people who don't know the sport. So the preparation for that has got to be different, because if you're sort of expecting to kind of cut through lines and sort of skirt the rules of just moving around the venue and kind of ducking under a rope or something like that to see the river, to analyze the river a little bit better. It happens everywhere, but if they say, no, you can't do that at the Olympic Games, and you sort of lose your cool, you lose your mind, bye-bye Olympic performance. It all goes out the window. So all that to say that we had a very particular warm-up routine leading into the Olympic Games. We knew that our first run was going to be at 10:17 in the morning. So we woke up at 4:45 in the morning for a race. It started at 10:17, and we programmed every minute from the time we woke up to the time that we raced. And that accounted for things like, of course, meals, stretching, showers, massage, walking and analyzing the course, warm up, time speaking with coaches, a little rest and relaxation leading up to that. But not only did we plan out that day, Josh, but we actually rehearsed it step by step, minute by minute, the day before the Olympics. So we're like at the course the day before our race, wearing our normal clothes that we're going to wear the next day. And we're getting ready to race. And the coaches of the US whitewater team are like saying, you guys know you're not racing today. We're like, yeah, we know we're not racing. Well, like, what are you doing? We're like, we're rehearsing the routine. And they're like, the coaches are like, you might be gripping a little bit hard right now. We're like, you know what? It actually feels like we're learning everything so that tomorrow this will feel like a little bit more normal than it does today. And that is a huge part of like what worked on the next day at the Olympic Games. When we went to execute that whole day, starting at 4:45 in the morning, it was a little bit like Groundhog Day, right? The movie with the alarm going off. It was just repeat the same thing we had done the day before, but we had started to plan out that routine 6 months in advance of the Olympic Games. So I think that what that does, what the main thing you're trying to do with these kind of routines is you're trying to head off distractions. You're trying to minimize a negative, kind of lose your cool response when something goes wrong, because the more that you keep that good energy inside of you and you're not losing it arguing with volunteers and officials and coaches and things like that, then the more energy you have to put into your performance, the performance you've been training all these years for. And I just think that the way you asked that question, it really invited me to talk about, the preparation routine. And as that relates to people who are watching and listening to us have this conversation today, if you have to be at work at 7:30 in the morning, I'm not advocating for you to wake up at 3:30 in the morning and go through some routine. All I'm asking you to do is to give a little bit of thought to what a daily consistent routine could look like for you that starts a little bit before you actually start engaging with others. Or the way I like to say it is, we're so used to living in a world today where we're turning on our phones, we're turning on our TVs, we're turning in all this noise, all these voices talking to us before we talk to our own voice, with our own voice, to talk to ourselves. And that is really the spirit of what we did on the day of the Olympics. And I think was a big part of kind of how it set up the way we paddled, the way we performed on the water was the preparation routine before that.
I really love that. One thing I'm curious about, Joe, is what signifies you to start the race? Is it a whistle? Is it a gunshot? What's the signal for you to it's time?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So, what is interesting about whitewater canoe slalom is that, like ski racing, it's just one competitor on the river at a time, one person. Like, there's only one skier in a
Hmm.
traditional downhill slalom, giant slalom race. I know there's some other head to head skiing now, but in the traditional classes, it's one skier. And the way we start is there's just like a series of beeps. There's like four beeps, and then in the fifth beep there's a high beep, and then you break the start line and you're on the water, you're on the clock. And what was interesting about the Olympic race and that crossing the start line was it started in flat water. There was like a 7 or 8 second sprint or a 6 second sprint on flat water before you dropped into the rapids on the Olympic whitewater channel here in La Seu d'Urgell. And that little sprint on flat water, there was something that was so like relieving about finally being on the course, finally getting this event underway. And all you had to do was just paddle hard, and there was no obstacle yet. There was no, traversing waves, hydraulics, rocks. I mean, that was all coming. But for the first 6, 7 seconds of your Olympic run, you're just kind of enjoying moving the canoe as fast as you can over flat water.
Oh, that's really interesting. So tell me, what is the last thing that you told yourself before the final fifth beep?
So, what's cool about our sport is that at the Olympics, well, now it's a little bit more for us. There was these 1 minute intervals between competitors. So the boat in front of you starts, and then you have about 55 seconds in the start area. And it's just you. The starters are nearby. They're in a little house with it, has the clock, and they're controlling the beeps and all that. And I've called the start area of the Olympics, this little hold that you're in, this in the flat water, as like the most sacred place I've ever experienced on earth. I mean, it is like, I mean, you've trained so much for this event, and like now it's here, but it's just you. And the way I like to say it, and especially remember, like I'm 22 years old at the time, my canoe partner's like 28 or 29. And I mean, so we're young. I mean, we're young. I mean, your ego is like very actively engaged that part of your life. And I gotta say, like, there's nothing. I mean, there's nowhere for your ego to go there. There's no one to impress. There's no one to put on a show for. There's no one to look good for. Like, it is just a very humble, kind of like stripped down, naked space of just you and the essence of you. So, what really became apparent to me about those 55 seconds in the start area was gratitude. Was gratitude for the people that have supported me on this journey, the coaches. I won't say the whole 55 seconds. At some point, you are thinking a little bit about how I want to feel, when we move over the start line. To be on one side of the start line and then be on the other, like, to me, that's a bigger jump than crossing the finish line. And
Hmm.
so you do spend a little bit of time on that moment. But the thing I like to share with people, to the question you just asked, gratitude.
Wow. It's really interesting you say gratitude, because my next question was, what was the last thing you told yourself once you realized you won the gold medal? Once you knew that the medal was yours. And it's funny you say gratitude before the race even starts, right? Because that's a reaction I think people would expect for as soon as you receive that medal.
What I think is interesting, that I feel like I was really very fortunate to understand something at a young age. And 22 is still pretty young for canoeing. I mean, at that time, I had been on the U.S. team for 6 years already on the senior team. I was training with the very best athletes in the world. The U.S. team was a super strong program during all of those years. We had a lot of world champions. One of our teammates was just known as the greatest athlete in the sport. He is a good friend and someone with whom I learned from the time I was 12 years old. So I say all that I had a lot of opportunities to mature, but it doesn't guarantee that you're going to make the right choices and sort of bring the right disposition. But I was very lucky, Josh, to have those people, all these world medalists, world champions, the legendary coach of the sport, to kind of look at and to sort of normalize how they were before I was ready to win a race like the Olympic Games. I was very much a part of, as a teammate and a supporter and a friend, of watching these amazing athletes, see how they prepare themselves to win gold medals at world championships and World Cup races. So that's where I think that presence of mind came from. Because I think a lot of young athletes and a lot of young people in business and in work, they kind of tell themselves a story about the kind of mindset that they are supposed to have or should have when the
Mm.
clock counts down. And the funny thing about that is, the moment you start thinking that you're not in the right mindset and I got to find the right mindset at that last moment, you're done. You're not confident in who you are at the moment. And this is why almost at every world championships, every Olympic games, there is always some older athlete who appears to be like beyond their peak, beyond their like moment of greatness in the sport, that just makes peace with who they are and how they are at that big race. So there's always one big surprise of an older athlete who appears to be a little bit beyond their best performance that ends up winning a medal at an Olympic game or a world championships. And that's the only difference of how they do it, is just, okay, they may not feel great, the best about how they are, but they're better in general at making peace with how they are and who they are than maybe someone that is 10 years, 12 years younger than them, that's thinking, oh my gosh, like I gotta be in, and name the number one ranked, I gotta be in Alcaraz mode, or I got to be in Serena Williams mode, or I got to be in Michael Jordan mode, whatever, and they're
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
telling themselves like, you can't win unless you do that. And it's just not true. The way you actually find a better sense of performing is to make peace with that relationship to yourself, that connection to yourself.
I really like that philosophy. So we're going to start to transition here. Um, and I'm curious what you use today. How do I phrase this? What did you learn during your time doing the slalom, the canoeing, that you still use today?
So it's a really good question, and I spoke about this at a recent engagement with leaders. It was a live setting, and there was a little bit of the speaking program that I did. Josh, we talked about my Olympic journey. What I learned about high performance, then transitions from that onward, what I thought I needed, and then what it meant to sort of redefine high performance, which is
Mm,
kind of that stage where I am now and the stage where I really am comfortable talking to people. So we'll get to the last
yeah.
part in a moment. So, one of the things that I tell people about this environment that I grew up training in on the Potomac River with these world champions and the legendary coach, there were two primary attributes that really stuck out to me. And I'm not advocating this to anyone, I'm just telling you they were really big influences for me. And they were competition and innovation. So, on competition, when I went to a training session on the Potomac River, holy cow, Josh, we were competing so hard. We had at any given moment the gold, silver, and bronze medalists from the last world championships, all Americans at the same workout, and we're all training against them. Like, how is that not going to be like an intensely competitive workout? And our legendary coach was building a space for us to really bring out that sense of competition. Didn't matter the kind of workout we were doing, whether it was like a base recovery workout, that was competitive, you know, doing some anaerobic threshold work, that was competitive. Technique and race preparation, that was also super competitive. So much so that with my canoe partner, Scott, when in those 6 years that we were paddling together leading up to the Olympics in 1992, like we would go to World Cup races and we would talk to each other about the race afterwards. And we would say, these are World Cup races. And we would be like, yeah, that was an interesting competition. It didn't come close to hitting the competitive level of our practice sessions on the Potomac River, but it was pretty good by World Cup standards. That is how we were talking to each other in races that we won medals in. Like, we knew that the competition, the level of competition, the standard of competition was a bit more crazy in our practice sessions than in our race sessions. So that was one really big takeaway for me. We competed
Mm.
hard all the time so that when we competed at a big international event, like, it didn't feel like a big deal to go out and compete. We had almost like an autopilot mode to it. And that's not necessarily good all the time. I'll come back to that. The second thing was
Mm.
innovation. Our coach and these top athletes completely embraced the idea of innovation. You want to talk about better ways to train. You want to talk about building better equipment. You want to talk about incorporating technology into our training. Everything was invited and open and on the table from anyone. You didn't have to be the best or the world champion to suggest an innovation of idea. Or you want to design your own boat, your own paddle, your own helmet, your own life jacket. That was all encouraged and celebrated in our group. So innovation was a really big part of it. Interestingly, the doubles canoe that my canoe partner and I raced at the 1992 Olympics, we designed it with another doubles canoe team from the United States. And the boat was designed for two things. It was designed for our canoeing style, our technical style, and secondly, for the water here on the 1992 Olympic course in Laseo. We used that boat two or three times, and like, that's it. Like, I mean, we trained in it, but we raced in it like only one or two other times besides the Olympics, did the Olympics, and then the boat was like never used again. Funny enough, you can, or anyone who's listening to this in the Appalachia area, you can go to Western North Carolina down near Bryson City to the Nantahala River, the Nantahala Outdoor Center at the River's End restaurant, a beautiful restaurant right on the Nantahala River. You look up at the ceiling and there's the doubles canoe that we raced at the 1992 Olympics. It's hanging from the ceiling of that restaurant. And
What's the restaurant name again?
it's called River's End. And by the way, I've talked to our mutual friend Greg Crumpton about like he needs to go down there and take in a meal at River's End. And but I know we have people that are watching and listening in that part of the United States. But like that's super cool to me. The boat doesn't really have any other functional value than sitting on the ceiling, hanging from the ceiling, a River's End restaurant, the Nantahala Outdoor Center, where we were training for the 3 years leading up to the 1992 Olympics. So you asked the question, what did I take out of that time that I still carry today? Funny enough, that the hard lesson I had to learn in transition was thinking, oh, I'm just going to take aspects like competition and innovation and take it with me everywhere I go. Turned out, being in competition mode all the time as a leader, as a small business owner, as an executive, as an entrepreneur, didn't make a lot of sense. So in the transition phase, what I learned, and it is so important, is what I needed to unlearn, what I needed to untrain. So to this day, I am still like, I'm a 5 day a week runner. I run every day, Monday through Friday. I love to run. And sometimes I sign up for a running race. I do just fine in those running races. I have not used a piece of technology in my running in more than 6 years now. Not a watch, not a phone, not a wearable, not a heart rate monitor, nothing. The only thing that I gauge when I go out for a run is I listen to nature and I listen to myself, and that's it. And that's not going to work for everyone. But I tell people like, there's a lot to learn. It took me a lot of untraining to learn how to do that. And now when I go to the start line of a mountain trail race where I am being timed, although I'm not carrying the time with me, I don't see the time until after the race is over, and that's fine. But yeah, there's a lot to redefine in high performance, and I think that's where I am. But I will say I'm going to answer your question without. I'm going to just tell you very clearly what I did bring with me. My doubles canoe partner Scott Straussball and we were really different people, really different people. I know diversity in the year 2025 it probably means something different than it did in 1987 when Scott and I started paddling together. But we were not 180 degrees difference, but we're about 179. And I truly believe, had we been 175 degrees different, we don't win the Olympics. And so there was a lot of pain and friction and resistance and arguing and fighting that went along in our partnership of learning how to paddle the doubles canoe together. And what I will tell you is that what I've taken forward, the most important thing I've taken forward that I haven't given up on is the idea of learning and collaborating with people who are really different than me. I'm in a relationship right now with my girlfriend Maria. We've been together for 6 years. We're different. She's Catalan. My native language is English. Hers native language is Catalan. I didn't speak much Catalan when we started dating 6 years ago. She didn't speak much English, and it's so beautiful. It is so beautiful. Like, I mean, I think what comes out, what you learn about yourself, how you show up in front of people that are different than you with an open mind and an open heart. That to me is something that I believe that I learned paddling with Scott that I haven't given up on. And I can tell you, like, I mean, we'll get into this more later in the conversation, but the last 6 years of my life have been the best 6 years of my life. And that is something I believe you could tie back to how Scott and I managed our relationship for better and for worse at times, and that makes a big difference in my life today.
That's a great segue into our next question, which is, Joe, what's something that our audience thinks that they understand that they might be getting wrong or seeing incorrectly?
I keep coming back to this topic of how we see high performance in anything, in business, in relationships, in creativity, in health and wellness. I think that the world has gotten really, really good at getting us to focus on our future self and what our future self wants, what our future self needs. And I don't think that's inherently a bad thing. I know inherently that's not a bad thing. But I think when it starts to create the doubt and the fear that what you currently have isn't enough, that you are not enough, that is what I think people are missing in ways that if you don't do the inner work, if you don't do the connection to self work as it stands today, not how it's going to stand when you reach all your goals, but as it stands today, I think it's going to be very hard to reach your goals. So I don't have an issue with connecting to the future self, but connecting to current self has got to come first. And I think it's just harder than ever in the world we're living in to do that today. We have influencers, we have people that are just telling you that if you just do something else or you show up, as someone you aren't currently yet, your life will be better. You'll be happier. You'll be on the way. And it's really easy to believe that and to buy into that. And I just think that the real answer is it depends. It depends. It depends on your lived experience. It depends on your values. It depends on your relationship to yourself. I don't know about you. I mean, I've gone through big chapters of my life where, I in my own relationship with myself, I have not stood up for what I really wanted in my life, what I really felt, what I really, believed that I thought would be good for me, that I thought would be interesting, something that I would enjoy. And when you get good at passing on that and overlooking at that or suppressing that, holding that in, we get really, really good at doing that. And that starts to influence what you hear and what you believe about what high performance really looks like. And I think the real kind of call here is not to tell people, it's not to judge where you are, but if this part of the conversation just helps people to say, what would it look like to connect to myself a little bit deeper? What do I really want? With clarity and sincerity and love for yourself. What is it like to feel those feelings fully? I think that is hugely powerful.
I like that philosophy and that perspective. My challenge would be, how do you do that? How do you focus on yourself today and be present while also staying ambitious and growth oriented towards something in the future?
Yeah, I think it's an order of things. Again, it's not either or, but it's got to be a first things first piece to this. And so a couple of things that, some prompts and some ideas that I use in that question. And I'd love to hear yours because you and I have talked, like, you're grounded. So I want to ask you what your prompts are. But I will just share with you that, you know, one of the things that I think about a lot is how can I enjoy the task a little bit more. So even if I'm doing something that's hard and something that doesn't feel good, or maybe I'm running and it's not feeling great out there, but like I'm pretty far away from home, I know I'm not going to stop. I think that prompt, like, how could I enjoy this like 1% more? And what that's going to do is that's either going to move my attention into something beautiful that I see, or it's just going to take me to my breath, to something simple and
Mm.
constant and something that's been with me through this whole journey. It cannot be changed. It doesn't care about the past or the future. That is a great way to start to feel what you're feeling. And I think when you open the door to that happening and you get clear, oh my gosh, like then you can really start to change the way you engage with others, the way you engage with creativity, the way you engage with your inner circle, the way you can engage with, what I call your weak connections, not your strong connections, but the people that you bump into on just on an occasional basis. That those kind of connections are really important in our life too. But when you have opened up a dialogue with yourself that is, that comes from a place of self-care, self-kindness, self-love, and it just takes a few prompts to do that, you start. And by the way, I will, at the end of this episode, I'll share a little resource about some prompts that I'm using right now to help me do this. But I'll tell you another one about beliefs that we don't check in on. Here's another good one, and then I'm going to turn it over to you for yours. I like to ask myself when I haven't tested myself on the truth about something, maybe I will say something or maybe I'll repeat something I just heard that I liked. And the prompt that I'll ask myself, Josh, is could the opposite of this be true? And it's a
Mm.
great way to just sort of ask myself, oh, that sounds so good, but wait a minute. If I did the exact opposite, is it possible I could still get the same result? And when I answer yes, then I'm like, oh, there's like some adaptability here. Maybe I don't know everything. Maybe, I'm opening myself to the way someone else might see the same thing and say, oh, I don't have to like train so hard that it hurts and grind. That like maybe I can just sort of relax and lean into the process and enjoy it. And I can still get a personal best when I go out and do a mountain trail race. I'm just asking myself that question is like, could the opposite be true? And like, that's a great one for sort of testing beliefs you haven't checked in on in a long time. But what about you? Like, I know you are someone who I feel your connection to others, so much love, so much care, so much wisdom to share. So I know that doesn't happen without some inner work as well. Like, what kind of things are you doing and how are you prioritizing that?
It's a really good question. I love being on the receiving end of questions during these shows, Joe. I gotta say. So thanks for asking
Just
that. And
interview more coaches and you'll get it.
and you're right. And this has been a process for me. I, for a long time, lived in the high performance mode, inching my way closer and closer to burnout. Every day I went to work, which, listen, served me from the prototypical success standpoint. Landed us on the Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing companies in America 3 times. I've got the book, the podcast, all that. But to your point, if you're constantly reaching for something, it can be exhausting and it can take away from the present moment and really confuse, I think, at least for me, who you are, what your identity actually is, and so, a couple of things that I try to remember. I told you I've got my sticky notes up on my desk at
Sure.
work, and learn to surf is one of them, which we were talking about before this conversation. I think an important thing that I remind myself multiple times a day even, is that there's a difference between being in the pursuit of a goal and setting an intention that you want and staying present with that intention. And so what I mean by that is, well, I gravitate back to the phrase, what if the only purpose of this very moment is to get us to the next one? So I have an image in my head of what I want and where I want to be, but where am I right now, to your point, in the present moment, and what does that mean for me right now? And that kind of helps drive my decision making. Am I grateful for where I am? Well, or am I upset because I realize I don't have something I want? And these are natural human reactions. And so I don't think that anyone, and this is just my opinion, right? I don't think that anyone can truly live in one mindset their entire life, and it's going to be that positive mindset. I think you started off by talking about, kind of accepting where you are and using that, to
Right.
basically as a compass, right? And so that's kind of how I remain present while still being, ambitious, as some people would say, is I set my intentions and I focus on the moment and what I have to do right now in order to achieve it. And then I have physical things that I do. I run, I lift weights, I cold plunge. Cold plunge is huge for me because I do have this motor in my head that can shoot to the past or shoot to the future. And if I'm thinking about the past or the future, where am I not?
Yeah.
Right here. And so once I step in that icy cold water, I have no choice but to be right here.
Yeah, I don't do that, but what's going through my mind as I hear you say that is that I guess the shock, the feeling of the cold water, it's like it you have to get out of your head and into your body. You have to
Right.
go down to feel because it's you're feeling, you're not thinking now. And
Right.
I think that is, in these companions that we're carrying, these inner companions that we're carrying with us on this journey, which by the way, you sort of alluded to some of these emotions. Like, I don't know that the goal, I don't walk around anymore with the goal to feel great or feel happy. What I'm trying to do is just welcome whatever's there a little bit better. And then happiness takes care of itself when it shows up,
Yeah.
or happiness isn't just like, hey, this is so fun. I want to feel more of this, but maybe it's just feeling less attached to an outcome. That also
Mm.
feels pretty good. But I think what you said that got me thinking about the cold plunge that I think is so important, maybe for people to take away, whether they cold plunge or not. We have these companions that go with us on the journey, and our heads, our thoughts, our thinking is the most dominant, loudest screamer in the car. I
Mm.
mean, it is like we're the
Every
driver
time.
and
Every
the
time.
brain is. And so for me, I think one of the prompts that we ought to be looking for, and I don't know what the right prompt is for this, how to do it, but it's just like, how do we just sort of ask our hearts, hey, could you weigh in on what's going on here? Like, brain has a lot to say about it, but what that does is that it moves everything down to the body level where the heart is. And now you're feeling instead of thinking. And I guess
Mm.
to me that one of the things that came over me when you talked about the cold plunge, because you said it with, you were smiling, like it's something that is a big part of doing this. And so I'm just sitting here thinking, like, why does that work? Why does that work? And I'm sure there's like a lot of scientific evidence like why it works. But just on an emotional level, what comes up to me is that I guess it moves you out of your head and into your body about as quickly as one could ask for, even if you've done it 100 times,
Exactly.
100 days in a row.
Every time. That's exactly
That's
right.
so cool.
And it slows me down, Joe. It really does, because when you start to think about the future or the past, or you live in either one of those and not in the present, time goes so fast because you're just not here, right? And my thoughts are going a million miles a minute. When I step into the cold plunge and I sink down into that water, I feel it in my body, number one. So I'm not thinking anymore. My body's in fight or flight. It's saying, okay, the only thing that we need to worry about right now is staying alive. And that helps me because it stops. And then when I get out of the cold plunge, it's easier for me to recognize where my thoughts were and where my thoughts need to be or where my thoughts are. And so that's what really helps. My next question for you, because I have opinions and thoughts about this too, and you kind of alluded to it, and I don't remember exactly what we were talking about. But oh yeah, you had said something about athletes tend to think about the mindset that they should have.
Yes.
What do you think about the word should?
Yeah, when I said that, it was like I noticed this with the younger athletes. That we get a lot. I think there's so much content and teaching in the world that is like step one, step two, step three. That like there's an
Yeah, yeah.
that if we just do it like that, like we'll be in the right space. So that sort of prompts this idea, like there's a right mindset to be in, and so again, this is again the problem with focusing on your connecting to your future self before your present self, your current self, is that for me it opened up in such a clear way the gap from where I was to where I wanted to be. And again, I can't say this enough. I'm never going to say that's inherently a bad thing,
Mm-hmm.
but if that goes unchecked, the word should is going to show up a lot because you're like, oh, well, I want to be where I think I should be, not where I am. And like it, and I think it also just forms, it kind of corrodes the relationship with the present. And the thing is, we need the present. I can't like the
Mm-hmm.
only way to improve. I don't know. I'm going to take all that back. It's not the only way. Um, the idea that if we didn't have the want, the goal at all, there's going to be evolution. You can't stop it. So to me, if you had the ability to put everything you had into lifting the weight, running the step, paddling the stroke, writing the business proposal, if you were just so present and you weren't thinking about the outcome of it, how would that not give you the best chance of advancing to the next moment,
Mm-hmm.
that you spoke about? So, just as an example, I always say, like anyone who goes to the Olympics or Paralympic Games, of course they're going to dream of winning a, a medal, of being on the podium, the top step of the podium. Everyone has that dream. But you asked me about being in the start line of the Olympic Games. What good would it do to think about what color medal I'm going to win? Like the word that isn't going to help. Like it, not only is it not going to help me, it's taking away energy from what it could be, which is the present moment. And I think when you start to think about the things, the gaps in life that create more shoulds, I should do this, I should do that, the gap from where we are to where we want to be, again, leaving that unchecked is, and
Mm-hmm.
not learning how to work with that, and not figuring out things like gratitude, not figuring out things like contentment for what you do have and what you can do with what you have, the people that are in your life today, the things that you have in your life today. You don't have to wait to do that. I just had the conversation with a friend before this call, and he's someone that is, in between work right now, and he's very much wants to be working. And at one point, he was talking to his priest and said, yeah, I really want to be, I want to give back. I want to contribute. When I'm doing better, like I want to do that. And the priest said, no, 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 no. And he said, you want to give back? We start today. We start now. We don't have to wait till you're someone else to start doing that. And I knew that was the punchline of where this person I was talking to was going. I knew the priest was going to say that to him, and it's the best advice. It is the best advice for whatever it is that you want to do. Find the part that you can start to do today in the present moment. You don't need the better piece of equipment. You don't need the better piece of clothing. You don't need the better car. You don't need the better running shoes, the better computer, the better phone, the better camera. Use what you have today and just begin.
I like that a lot. For me, it's I do a lot of work to lean into reality, how things are. Right. And there was a time in my life where, I took the stance, well, I should be here. I should do that. I should be this far along, or I should be taller, whatever it is. Right.
Yeah.
I use that word a lot. And what it was causing for me, Joe, was I wasn't living in reality. I was living in this manufactured state in my own mind because of the thoughts and because of, you said it best, right? We're inundated with all of this information, social media and TV and ads, and everything is appealing and everything is easy, quote unquote, today, right? And so it can, if you lose sight of your presence and your feet on the ground, right? It can cause you to live in this state of should. It should be easy for me too, Joe. Why isn't it? Well, because it's not actually supposed to be. This is just what we see all around us every day, right? Because it's an altered state of being. So I guess my point in that is that I've tried really hard to eliminate the word should from my vocabulary, see things for how they are, and be at peace with reality, whether that means I'm having a bad day or I'm having a good day, or I've got happy emotions or I've got sad or fearful emotions. That is reality. And my best chance of succeeding in this moment and getting to the next moment is to sit with that and be with that, understand that, and accept that.
Everything you just said embodies the power of full engagement, like that full engagement with the moment, with the moment and with who you are right now. And that's why our attention is that's the precious resource. And so I
Yeah.
mean, and the noise that you're talking about, the influencers and the advertising, number one, they're really, really good. And number two, they're also not that wrong. It's like, yeah, my life would be like if I if I sort of did every marketing, bought into every marketing or sales program or thing that comes into my inbox, like I'm sure I would be better at it. But I think this kind of this also gets into we haven't talked much about the waves yet, but so I'm a whitewater canoeing athlete, and I teach.
Actually, let me ask my next question, because I am transitioning into this
Yeah,
philosophy.
please.
Yeah, if you don't mind. So I do my. It's basically, what does thinking in waves mean, right? And how does it shift the way that we approach performance, leadership, life?
Yeah, I love this. So, Thinking in Waves, first of all, is an essay that I write every week where I transfer these ideas and skills learned paddling a surf ski kayak designed for surfing offshore ocean waves, and I frame my learnings and all of these lessons as a process for deep reflection and meaningful life transition. And this wasn't my sport. I grew up on the river as a whitewater canoeing athlete, and then about a couple of years ago, I find this fabulous sport in the sea where you surf these offshore ocean waves in a surf ski kayak. I paddle a singles boat with Maria next to me. Sometimes I'm in a doubles boat with Maria in the same boat. We have a coach down in southern Spain named Coach Boyan. And we went to Boyan 3 years ago, and we learned his steps for surfing a wave. And I took those steps and I write about them in a way that gives people like an innovative model for creative thinking and making better choices. So to the point that, we've one of the themes that you and I have been talking about in our conversation today is the idea of letting go, like what not to say yes to, but what to say no to. So, very quickly, and we can dive into these 5 steps a little bit, but I'm going to dive into the third of the 5 in a moment. But step 1 is basic speed, which just means like before you surf life waves, we're just going to improve your basic all day, every day velocity to the best we can. The better your basic speed is, the more opportunity you're going to have to surf life waves. Secondly is direction. Very simply, that's being aligned with your values, being aligned with your bigger picture, being aligned with yourself. You can look on social media in the world today. Everyone is surfing waves. 95% of them are surfing them in any direction the wave is going. And someone that is really committed to direction, they won't surf a wave that is not going in their direction. If your goal is to go north to the lighthouse and the waves are going west out into the middle of the ocean, don't surf the waves west out in the middle of the ocean. Go against the waves and keep going north. 3, and this is the one I want to focus on for a moment, is called wave selection. Like we were saying, in the waves of our life, every incoming wave looks pretty darn good right now. Every email for sales and marketing I get in my inbox, like if you read it, it looks pretty good. Like someone, whether it's a human or AI, has thought about the words that have gone into that and like, oh yeah, that would be better. One of the most profound things that Coach Boyan ever said about surfing waves was about this step 3, wave selection. And he said, your best surfing in life is not going to be determined by the waves you catch. Your best surfing in life is going to be determined by the waves that you let pass you by. That was a mic drop moment for me. This idea that you don't have to surf every wave. And the beauty is when you think this big, beautiful wave that has your name written all over it, and you just kind of teach yourself to let it pass by and trust that there's another good wave behind. When that wave passes you and you start to get good at like just letting these things pass you by, the ones that remain are the ones that are truly for you. It brings focus to what you're doing. So instead of trying to ride every wave, you ride the waves that are good for you. And by the way, instead of trying to ride big waves, what's wrong with riding small waves? Small waves are easier to catch. They require less effort to get on, and they give you free energy. And with that free energy, you can link from a smaller wave to a bigger wave. But all of us are like trying to go from like being a business making $100,000 a year to making $3 million a year on one wave. Stop it. Stop it. Like to go from 500,000 to 700,000 in a year is phenomenal. It's a great improvement. Little waves surfed well do the job just fine. There's a lot more small waves in the world. They're easy to catch and they have the same amount of free energy and they launch you onto bigger waves. But we're walking around the world saying, no, I'm not going to take the small ones. I'm in it for the big giant tidal wave, like surf, or die. Like you're going to run your business like that? I don't think so. I don't think anyone wants to do that. Like the cost of a mistake just wipes you out. Like, come on, there is a better, more proven way, scientifically to perform. There's better free energy in the world to help you out. And it all falls under this rule of wave selection, which is step 3. And then real quick, Josh, step 4, we don't have to go as deep into this one. It's surf the wave. But when we're on life waves, like we have a lot of options. And I think the biggest thing I'll just say is that when you're on a wave that's going in the right direction and you're surfing the right wave, is this idea that we think a wave is going to last forever. The life of a
Hmm.
wave and the life of everything that we're doing in life, every relationship, every health kick that we're on, every belief, the life force of a wave is a wave rises, it collapses, and it rises again. And to pretend like a wave does anything different is absolute craziness to me. A wave is going to rise, it's going to collapse, and it's going to rise again. And just because it collapses doesn't mean you have to collapse. You have options. All I'm saying is that if you think a wave does anything else except for that, it's just not true. That's what a wave does. And then the fifth step is, I love this, and you have to remember Coach Boyan. He's this big Bulgarian guy living in southern Spain, and he's got this thick Bulgarian accent. And so his fifth step of surfing the wave is yeehaw. And the first time he told me this, he's like, it's this idea of like, we need to celebrate, we need to recognize when we're doing something well and stop and pause. Like, literally, of all five steps in the wave surfing progression, this is the one I need the most help with. And the funny thing about Boyan, the first time he told me this, like, we're in southern Spain, and he says, yeehaw. And he looks at me and he says, Joe, like you mean it, like you're from Texas, And it just made me laugh to hear Boyan say that. So I love that. But these are the five steps, and I think when you apply them to how we think and how we sort of move through life, I don't think that thinking in waves is always telling us what to do as much as what we don't have to do. And I love that
Mm.
about thinking in waves.
I appreciate you sharing that. So I have speed,
Yeah.
direction, wave selection, surf the wave, and then yeehaw,
Yes.
celebrate. That's really incredible, and I can begin to see how you can apply this to almost all areas of life. As you're going through this and you're talking about waves, I kind of relate it to some of the terms I've used in the past, like everything is cyclical, or high risk, high reward, or even the opposite, right? I was actually thinking that when you were talking about wave selections and you were talking about the small waves versus the big waves. As you know, I just got back from Hawaii. I did some surfing, right?
Yes.
And I can tell you, in this analogy, right, there's nothing wrong with small waves. And if you can catch a big wave, great, but understand if you fall off that big wave, it hurts a lot more and it takes a lot longer to get back on the board,
Yes.
And so that's kind of what was going through my head too as you were saying this stuff, because you can kind of begin to take all of those instances in the waves and relate it to life and business and all that, and that's what I was thinking, because it's top of mind for me right now, which is really great. I had one. Oh, so help me understand then how a high performing individual can begin to ride these waves instead of fight these waves. Maybe they're not used to this mindset, and they've been taught their entire life that they just have to grit and bear it and go against the grain as much as possible, and that's the ladder to success. And they don't know, and they're not familiar with this ride the wave. So how do they begin to shift their mindset, Joe?
So first of all, when I say ride the wave, to ride the wave, there is going to be gritty, resilient, hard moments sometimes. Like, I think for me, this shows up in wave direction. I think if you know where you want to go and the waves aren't going in your direction, I'm so sorry, but we're not riding waves today. We're kind of going against the grain a little bit. But the funny thing is that there's a lot to learn about navigating the surf ski going against the wind. You learn a lot about balance, you learn a lot about force, you learn a lot about pressure and timing. And it's not super fun, but number one, I know that I'm being true to who I am when I do that, because my goal is to go in a particular direction. And And secondly, when it is time to turn and when the direction does come my way, I feel like I've got better skills to sort of go with that. Where that kind of shows up for me in my life, like I want to give some real examples. So, tell me, you're married, you have a family, is that correct?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. So let's think about our relationship with our partners for a moment here. Like I'll give you a great wave selection thing. You can be having a disagreement with the person that you care about most in the world. And what wave selection does for me is that there could be something that like, oh, I know that like I will score a point if I just impart this idea that I got to say that I know is correct. And what wave selection has taught me to do is like, what would the world and what would our relationship look like if I don't say it at all?
Mm.
And then it's like, there's just something that warms my heart when I do that. I'm like, I'm good. I don't need to say it. We're good. One of the things that like in a relationship like that I've just, it's my own belief. We all have different outlooks on what our relationships look like. I think all these things we're talking about today, our relationships, our work, our health and wellness, not just with our partners, but with our children, with our friends, they're all vehicles of personal growth and development. They're
Yeah.
all vehicles of personal growth and development. And so that is an example of when I feel like I don't have to weigh in and I don't have to say that thing. I don't have to be right about something. And I can just sort of step back and look at the overall state of the world and be like, you know what? This conversation doesn't need my opinion, right? Doesn't need another opinion from me right now. And I will just get the warmest feeling in my heart when that happens, when it lines up like that. That is an example of me thinking about wave selection, in my conversations with Maria sometimes. I find that to be like immensely helpful. Basic speed is another one. Step one, like my motivations for getting out and going running every morning. So you'll like this. Like one of my kind of big picture, like just beautiful things in life that I just love is seeing beautiful things from the water with Maria. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
just going to paint that picture. Like we can be in the river, we can be in the sea, and we're together. And, maybe it's the way the sun is setting, or we see a dolphin or a moonfish or something, or we see the light reflecting off the cliffs, a beautiful boat, whatever that is. We see something beautiful from the water. So then I start thinking, Josh, like, okay, I like this. And just because I've done it once doesn't mean it's like a box check. It means like, I like
Mm-hmm.
doing this. I'd like to keep experiencing this for a while. So then I start to think, okay, cool. I'm 56 years old. What would keep me out on the water a little bit longer each time I go to paddle? And what would keep me out on the water longer in the amount of years that I have to live, assuming I stay healthy? Because I figure the longer that I'm out on the water with Maria, the more likely we are to see beautiful things from the water together.
Yeah.
That is why I run every day. Like that becomes like
Mm.
I link that to like going out and going running every day and going through my morning routine. Like it doesn't feel great every time I do it, but I also, first of all, I have a peace about it when that pain or when that discomfort comes in when I go running. And secondly, it's attached to this idea of seeing beautiful things to the water together with Maria. And the likelihood that I can stay out a little bit longer, even better, with better basic speed. If I'm surfing waves in the sea and I'm using free energy given to me by the wave, and I'm using less energy from my body, guess what? I'm saving energy. I'm
Yeah.
using less of my own. That means I get to stay out on the water longer. I get to go further and farther with less energy. Efficiency is a beautiful thing. Efficiency is a beautiful thing, and efficiency and speed are not the same thing. But what basic speed does, it gives me the ability, it opens up more waves available to me to surf. So my all day, every day basic speed opens up more opportunities for me to be more efficient and ultimately do the things that I care about the most.
Thank you for bringing an element of practicality to that. These anecdotes and stories that you're interjecting, I know that they're helpful for me to be able to visualize and internalize this stuff. So I know that they're helpful for my audience as well. So I've got a couple of thoughts. I'm not sure which one to ask first, so I'll just go for it. But are waves predictable?
Um, it's a really great question. My gut feeling is yes and no. Sorry to disappoint.
That's
So
okay.
with experience, that when you're on a wave, which I think is really important, I think it's a lot easier to read what the next wave is doing or link to the next wave. But you're right, like a wave, not all wave, every wave is unique to itself. So it's not going to be exactly the same. But the wave is talking to you, the wave is communicating information to you about this rise, collapse, rise again cycle. And I think the more in tune you are with that cycle, the better you can make decisions about that. So your question leads into another like profound bit of wisdom from Coach Boyan. And we call this Boyan's golden rule of surfing. And this applies to anything that we're talking about today. And the golden rule of surfing is no matter what you want to do and where you want to go, surf the wave you're on to the best of your ability. So, what that means is that a lot of people are on a wave. Maybe they don't love the wave they're on and they kind of look 180, sorry, they look 90 degrees to their left or 90 degrees to their right. And they're like, oh, that wave looks great. And they just peel off the wave and they're like, they start paddling over to get that wave. But the problem is they just gave away all the speed and energy of the wave they're on. And they gave away
Mm-hmm.
their ability to read the waves and have that interaction of what the wave is doing. If you want to go 90 degrees to the left or 90 degrees to the right, you know what works really well is to go like 15 degrees to the left and link on before the wave you're on collapses, link on to another wave that is adjoins that wave, and you just work your way over to the 90 degrees in 15-degree increments. No one is doing this right now, Josh. Everyone is peeling off the wave. I call them, when you link the waves in like 15-degree increments, I call these linkers. And the people who are just, jumping off the wave and like, oh, I'm going to get over there and just abandon what I'm doing, I call those jumpers. We are living in a world of jumpers right now. And if you want to be a linker, the idea is to use Boyan's golden rule. Stay on the wave that you're on, use the energy, listen to the wave, communicate with it, follow its cycle so that you can make choices about the current rise, collapse, rise again cycle of the wave you're on to sort of make small jumps over to the side. And I know the world needs jumpers as well, but I mean, be one at your own risk. For me,
Hmm.
once you're in a conversation and in communication with the cycle of the waves, you might not be able to predict exactly what the next wave is going to do, but you get a lot more information if you don't abandon the wave that you're on.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that. I understand what you're saying. The next question that I had, because again, all this is very top of mind to me, and I'm curious where this feeling fits in your 5 steps and how we can relate it to life. One of the things that I really loved about my surfing experience in Hawaii was once you're paddling out there and you're waiting for the waves. So
Mm.
you're waiting there and you're waiting to see which wave you're going to select. For me, I can't speak for everybody, but there was no impatience. There was no I need to find it. I need to find it. I mean, when I'm out there and I'm staring at the coastline, hundreds of feet away, and the mountains in the background and the ocean behind me, and the sound of the waves, and no electronics on my body, right? There's just like a sense of serenity and peace that came over me that almost was like, hey, you don't even need to catch a wave. Like, this is cool in itself.
I remember surfing on longboards in Waikiki one time and having that exact feeling. I rented a board. There were no waves that day. And I just went out and I sat there and did exactly what you're talking about. And it was such a beautiful day. So I think where I would go with what you're saying about this and where it fits in is that you remember we were talking about the cold plunge and the idea of moving out of your head and feeling with your body. My
Hmm.
challenge to people that are listening along is, what does that look like in your work that you're doing when you're interacting with team members, colleagues, clients, associates, co-founders? What does that look like? Because our heads are just thumping in a work situation. So, what would
Yeah.
it take to prompt you to sort of use your heart a little bit, to move, get out of your head and get into your body? For me, I mean, I think like we had the benefit in these two stories about a surfboard, a beautiful scenery, beautiful waves, things that we don't normally see to help us do that. But let's just say that you don't have all those things. You know what you do have is you have about 15 seconds to close your eyes and to just focus on your breath, not think about the past, not think about the future, to think about this essence of yourself that has been with you forever. you know,
Hmm.
it's it's right there. Just for 15 seconds do that. And ask yourself, like, just give your body, give that sense of feeling, your heart, a chance to weigh in on what you're thinking about. And I think that is where we kind of get, very similar actions of what we get when we do the cold plunge. Very similar to what we get when we're sitting out, beyond the breaks on our surfboard, taking in the beauty and noticing what's going on around us. I think that is that little pause. And like, what's it going to cost you? I mean, you get to go back to using that screaming loud voice in your brain. It's going to come back in 15 seconds. So why not just use the 15 seconds to give it a try? It's just an experiment. It's
Hmm.
worthy of giving it a try. But what you might find is that, in these other passengers that we're carrying internally with us on the journey, is that we might realize that, oh my gosh, like, I really don't check in with the heart enough. I really don't check in with the gut enough. I don't really check in with the body enough. I'm keeping it in my head all the time. And I didn't even realize I was doing it. That to me is the value of the experience you just shared for, I think, for a lot of the people that are enjoying the content that you're creating right now. I just think about what their business environment and their business relationships and what their growth looks like. And it's not a judgment. It's just a lot of it has to be in the head. And I'm saying, let's just give it a shot. Let's move it to the body and see what happens. And like, I think we've talked about a number of experiences that help us do it. And the way we really do it when we don't have the sea, when we don't have the cold plunge, just close our eyes, focus on the breath, and don't be in the past, don't be in the present, just be with the essence of us that's been with us on this whole life journey so far.
Yeah. What would you say to someone, Joe, that said, I tried that? I tried that 15-second routine. I tried it 6 times and it didn't work. Damn it, Joe, it didn't work. What would you say to them?
What I would say is that, if you were really open to trying, if you really opened yourself, I mean, part of it is there's how everyone always says trust the process, which I kind
Hmm.
of like that saying. but I like it better when I add the words trust the process, but build a process worth trusting.
Mm.
So, I don't think any of these things require a big change. But if we're looking for the big change, then we don't really give the little ones a space to happen. So there is a little bit of trust that needs to go along with the process. So we haven't talked much about rest and recovery. So this is a great example of also staying present and, feeling things with our body. But one of the things that I always talk to clients about with rest and recovery, and I know everyone has heard everything about rest and recovery, so I'm just going to say a little bit about it. The same muscle that you use to go to Hawaii for 1 week is the same muscle that you use to take that breath for 15 seconds. It's a vacation muscle. You can call it the vacation muscle if you want, but it's the same one. And the way I talk to clients about it is what I'm usually chasing, what I'm going for with my clients. If they're like on back-to-back Zoom calls that they've scheduled right one on top of another, is like, great. How about 60 seconds of mindful breathing? And all we're trying to do is signal, like create a connection between our body and our mind, and really let the mind know that the body is still here. So I wouldn't judge it as it's not working. Is I would say, great, you tried it 6 times to let the mind know that the body is there, the heart is there, the gut is there. And if what you are doing with the head is working, great, keep doing it. But I think the reason we're having this conversation is because we sort of feel like we've let the head get out of control. So what
Yeah.
are we going to do with that? And I think when you sort of realize the little waves are connected to the big waves, the little waves lead to the big waves, why not start with 15 seconds? And just embrace that maybe that is the way to build a process worth trusting.
Joe, tell me a truth that took you years to fully understand, but changed the way you live and lead once you did.
Oh, there are many. I think the one that comes up for me is to fully feel my feelings.
Mm.
So the story behind this one, Josh, is that I have this great Olympic race at 22 years old. And I mean, it's so stupid in that, all you've done is prepared for a process that would yield good performance. You weren't training to win the Olympics. You were training to do the best you can do at the Olympics, right? There's a big difference between the two, right? But somehow you end up at the end of the day as the winner. And it feels a little bit like someone just came over, they put a crown on your head and a cape over your shoulders, and they said, well, welcome to royalty. Well, how do you do that? Like, you kind of sense like this changes a lot of things for you. You're Olympic champion now. You've got a crown and a cape. And so almost instantly, like it feels like you have to start making some decisions about the kind of things you're going to say, kind of relationships you're going to build, kind of the way you're going to walk and carry yourself. Like this happens really, really quickly. And I don't want to say it's a good or bad thing. What was hard for me is that happened at 22 years old, and I didn't really revisit it again till I was about 49. So what that did is that, in as life happened, you go through life, you start to get in, you find yourself into relationships and circumstances and situations and business and creativity, all of the things that are there in front of you. And, you don't really feel like you're fully in this for yourself.
Mm.
And you're like, but I don't want to upset the apple cart. I don't want
Mm.
to and like in this case, like, oh, maybe I'm scared of, I'm scared of the conflict. I'm scared of causing the hurt, the pain that'll happen, with kind of turning this apple cart over. So you don't, the brain gets really good at just be like, oh, you have those feelings. Too bad. We're just going to keep them down for a while, And I think this is the thing that, I'm never trying to help someone or help myself get to a particular outcome. But I do think we're given a fairly limited time to live this life and to enjoy. Enjoyment is a big word. It's a prompt. We talked about, how can I enjoy this a little bit more? How can this be more enjoyable? And yeah, if we're not feeling the feelings, the idea that we are suppressing or holding something down, the idea that I'm doing that my partner is doing that my daughter's doing that, that's just the worst feeling. And so
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
idea that we're kind of creating ways and that, whatever it takes to kind of get people on that path, like, what would it look like if I did fully feel what I need to feel? Anger,
Mm.
fear, sadness, resentment, jealousy. By the way, those are the negative things. There's also a lot of happy things to do also.
Sure.
Sometimes we suppress those too. No, 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 I shouldn't be so happy. I don't want to show people that I'm that happy. We suppress that too.
Yeah.
Fully feel
Yeah.
the feelings. That's the I made some choices when I was young, and I didn't revisit it for a long, long time.
So how would you describe to somebody how to use their feelings, or are they there to be used?
Yeah, I think that I think you kind of answered the way, for me, you kind of answered that on the second part. I think it's
Mm.
just giving the space to welcome them.
I see.
Because I think so often, we're trying to make fear go away, or make sadness go away, or make anger go away, or make jealousy go away. And the funny thing is like, that's just like giving a fire more oxygen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, you're not, it's like, to me, I think we can agree on some level, if you felt those feelings and you've done those things, like, we know how that works out. It doesn't, or the what appears to be the solution isn't really the solution. And
Yeah.
it's not that there should be a solution for that. It's just welcoming that, so that, and if you do that and you just make some peace with, like, those other things are going to show up. What else is going to show up in its good time is some of those good ones, those happiness, those
Mm.
joyful moments, those the really cheerful ones. I mean, again,
Yeah.
enjoyment can be just letting go of attachment. It can be that simple, letting go of, like, attaching what we've attached to. And you don't have to beat yourself up for why you attached to this, or it has to be this way, or why I wanted this. Don't worry, it's just like you said, it's all, this is such human stuff that is never going to
Yeah.
be remembered by anyone except for you while the time you're here. That's it. That's it. So why
No,
not
that's true.
try some of these other things, or give yourself the space to fully feel those feelings, and look at, like, what would it take to enjoy the process a little bit more.
Mhm. So should we be learning from the feelings that we feel?
I think just the noticing is like the learning. Like, I think that
Oh,
in
okay.
itself, like, I think I said something to you when we first came on the call. I don't think we were recording. I think it was this word that has shown up for me a lot more in my meditations is surrender.
Mm.
And this idea that I'm not in full control. And for some reason, on some level, I know it's been with me in my life. You cannot paddle the rivers that I've paddled, and excelled in the sport that I excelled with, thinking that you are stronger or smarter or better than the river. You are not.
Yeah.
All of us together combined strength. The difference is, at some point where you get tired, the river's current just kind of keeps going and going and going.
Yeah.
So, to your point, like, do I want to fight this thing, or do I want to dance with it?
Mm.
That's exactly it. I mean, and so I've kind of known it was there, but I never really used that word surrender to it. That just felt like giving up a little bit too much. But it keeps showing up, and it's been a word that it's been around. And it's, again, I'm not saying that I don't have intention about things I want to do. I'm not saying that there aren't things I still want to have, and, things I'd like to aspire to. But there's a part of me that is just having a relationship with, I'm not in control of this a lot.
Mm,
And I got to say, it brings on, usually, I don't want to say I'm not looking for peace immediately, but I'm not surprised when peace follows that in some way, shape, or form at some point.
I see.
Do
Joe,
you
what's
ever
the
do
most
you, do you
important?
have that feeling ever? I mean, with surrender, does that? I mean, you're someone. I know you have a lot of goals, and you're.
Yeah.
I'm looking at beautiful books behind you. We're on a really well orchestrated podcast. You can't do these things without goals, but, like, on the other hand, like, how do you think about the things you're not in control of?
It's a really good question. I appreciate you asking. Um, I've never really thought much about the word surrender, honestly. I'm a big fan of Stoic philosophy.
Yeah.
Epictetus is a fan favorite, I guess you could say, of mine, and you know he was a very big advocate, along with Marcus Aurelius and Seneca and all those guys. Uh, about they talked a lot about understanding what it is that you can control, right? And I think they used a phrase called preferred indifference,
Mm.
um, which I think it's funny, Joe. I don't talk about that a lot because the word indifference, unless there's a lot of context behind it, can have a very negative annotation. So I think that's why we put preferred indifference in front of it. It basically means, to me at least, from my readings and learnings, is that the things that we can't control, we neither have to love or hate.
Oh, I love this.
That yeah, that they can merely just exist, right? And all we can control is what we do next, right? Our reaction to those uncontrollable things is what we can control, nothing more, nothing less.
Mm.
So that's how I think of it. And believe you me, I get tripped up 80 times a day. It is not it's not a honed in practice, but it's something that I strive for every day, and something I constantly remind myself of.
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I gotta ask you. We're gonna move to close here in just a bit. We got about 10 minutes left to the top of the hour. But what's the most important thing that we haven't talked about today?
Um, the most important thing we have not talked about today. Um, yeah, I guess what's coming up for me right now is, let's talk a little bit about relationship to nature for a moment.
Mm, yes.
I have a sense that a lot of people follow. Yeah, having seen some clips of your speaking, and watch the podcast here, I think a lot of people are looking for ways to progress, to advance, to find their untapped potential, which I think is great. And we're living
Hmm.
in a world right now where technology and work, it's going to do all, is going to be really helpful for that. So what I'm really thinking about then, I really don't have a strong opinion about technology and AI, and all the doing all the work. I just want the best version of you to show up to do that work when it's time. And so I
Hmm.
just think I obsess a lot about how to go about doing that. And from that point, I like to tell people I believe nature's best days are ahead of itself. Like, nature is this one place, like, it's not going to do anything, it's not going to change for you. It's just going to be what it's always been to every generation of humans, as long as there have been humans. It's going to be there. And I think one of the evolutions for me with the relationship with nature, Josh, is that, I went from thinking that nature was there to just be this place to serve me, to becoming like a two direction relationship, just like with a person, that it serves me, but I'm there to serve it as well. And now, when I sort of think like it really can be that easy as a walk, when I say nature, I'm not saying you have to go to Yosemite. I'm not saying you have to go drive hours into a national park. Nature can be as simple as just going into a city park and sitting on a park bench. Or, I remember having at one point, I had a coaching client who told me she lived in Krakow, Poland, and it was autumn there, and there was some park benches across from her apartment. I said, just go sit and see what you see, and she just started to notice the fallen leaves on the sidewalk. Nature can be that easy. And I think when we look at the tools in the toolbox that are available to us, we really overlook this one. And I think that if we are going to talk about things we're willing to try and experiments that we're willing to run, I just think putting yourself in nature, whatever that means to you, whether that's going fishing or whether that's going for a walk or that's a bike ride or just kind of noticing what's happening and what's happening on its own, with and the amazing beauty that it brings with it. And a tree doesn't have a goal to grow, like it doesn't have growth, it just evolves like in its own way. And I think
Mm-hmm.
being around this, we haven't touched on this, and I think it's just worth opening up to our relationship with nature, especially right now, here at this point in time when there's a lot of what I would call like anti-nature opportunities in front of us. Like if we're going to like put on
Yeah.
glasses and live in a world like of us, put screens, inches from our eyes and live in that world,
Yeah.
great. Just tell me what the contrast to that is going to be. And you're going to find what we're talking about with this relationship to nature. That's going to be the answer.
I can tell you that every time I go outside and spend even just a few minutes in nature, whenever I come back in to do my work or be with my family or do a podcast or whatever it is, I always, without fail, feel better in one aspect or another, whether I have more clarity, whether I can breathe better, whether, I feel like I can learn better, just in any capacity. And to me, that's a compass, right? To me, that tells me that,
Yes.
nature is something that nurtures me, and listen, I try not to blanket statement things, but listen, we're all humans. We're cut from the same cloth, and I'd be surprised to find out that nature didn't benefit everybody in the same way.
Like everything we've talked about, it's just an awareness of how we use it, and this one does take a little bit more energy and resource than just closing your eyes for 15 seconds and breathing. But I think what the value that it brings for the return on investment for that, 15 minutes outside and just wherever you are, and just not just don't overthink this one. Just put yourself
Mm-hmm.
and just be really graceful with yourself, and
Yeah.
don't measure it. Don't think that it's supposed to do something. Just be with it and take your time, and then just come back in and go about your work. And you kind of get into that routine. And I think the curiosity starts to kick in a little bit, like, oh, like
Yeah.
maybe there is more I could do. I could go a little bit longer on a weekend, or I could go to a different place. And but don't get ahead of
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. It just can be as simple as sitting on a park bench in the middle of a city.
Yeah. Love that. All right, Joe. What's one question that you wish people would ask you more? And then how would you answer it?
Oh my gosh. I'm really trying to think what I wish people would ask me. I guess I think it suggests your question is that it suggests I have an answer. I guess I'm going to
Mm.
keep it on the spirit of the question and say, I just wish people, as much as possible, would ask me the question they really want to ask me.
Mm.
As maybe like, have you ever like been like gone to a conference and like you listen to people ask the questions and it sounds like they're asking the questions they think they're supposed to be asking versus the questions
Yeah.
they think they should be, they want to ask. I
Yeah.
think that that's going to be my answer. Just like if you ever ask me a
I
question,
love
which
it.
by the way, we're going to get into this in a moment as a way to kind of continue the conversation here, ask the question that you really want to know about, that you really want to explore. If you think I can be helpful or you think Josh can be helpful, just ask us that question, and go and be open and just be open hearted in the ask and open hearted in the response.
Love that. Where can people find you, Joe?
Well, so I'm kind of excited about this. What I'm going to do is there is a resource page on my website for everything they don't tell you, with books and podcasts and blog posts, and links to Thinking in Waves, as well as a really cool video that I made from the surf ski this summer. And it's just for people listening to this podcast. You can find it at joejacobi.com/ETDTY. And there you will find ways to contact me. Like I said, subscribe to Thinking in Waves, which would be amazing to have you with me on that journey. And most of all, I do hope just to, there'll be ways to ask questions. If you ask me a question that I can share with Josh, please let me know. Like we can both give answers to questions that you have. Like I'm opening to that. I'm just so open to that. And anyway, joejacobi.com/ETDTY.
Joe, thank you so much for spending your time with us today, for doing what you do, for leaning in so hard to the Thinking in Waves philosophy and putting that out to the world to help people navigate business and life. This has been a truly enlightening conversation for me, and I know it has been for my audience as well. So 1,000 thanks.
Thank you so much. I loved it.